Imagine squeezing a 40-ton monster through a medieval British village. Now imagine the same truck blasting down an endless American interstate at 70 miles an hour. Two worlds, two philosophies, and one big question. Whose lorries, or trucks, actually rule the road? So today we're going head to head. Britain versus the world. Grit versus glamour. Narrow lanes versus open highways. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which trucks deserve the crown, and which ones would get stuck trying to find a parking space outside your local Tesco. Britain isn't like the United States, Canada, or Australia. Our roads are narrower, older, and built long before anyone imagined a 40-ton lorry would ever pass through a medieval village. You can't exactly blast down the A5 with a massive nose-heavy Peterbilt without ending up wedged between two stone cottages. So British lorries had to be different. Shorter wheelbases, tighter turning circles, and cabs that sat practically on top of the front axle made them nimble enough for the winding countryside. Compare that to the United States, where trucks were designed for the open road, long luxurious sleepers, giant bonnets hiding V8 diesels, and mile after mile of arrow-straight interstate. Europe, meanwhile, created its own style, streamlined cabs over engines, built for efficiency and comfort on high-speed motorways. Each region shaped its trucks according to its geography. So already, you see why the British lorry looks nothing like a Kenworth or a Mercedes-Benz Actros. Britain built lorries for tight lanes, but wait until you see America's rolling palaces and Europe's high-tech titans. Stick around, the real showdown's just getting started. And subscribe if you still haven't, if you like such content. Let's talk about the legends. The Scamel Rootman, introduced in the 1960s, was a proper workhorse. Known for strength and reliability, it became the go-to for construction and heavy industry. Then there was the ERF EC series, beloved by drivers for its straightforward design and toughness. Leyland built the Octopus, a rigid eight-wheeler that became almost symbolic of British municipal fleets. And you can't forget the Foden, whose two-stroke engines might have been controversial, but whose lorries had a presence that commanded respect. These trucks weren't flashy. They didn't boast chrome stacks taller than your house or fancy airbrushed murals of bald eagles. What they did have was grit. They could squeeze into tight quarries, haul insane loads across winding hills, and keep running even after years of abuse. In short, they had personality. Now let's cross the Atlantic. The United States truck scene is almost another planet. Brands like Peterbilt, Kenworth, and Freightliner are synonymous with big rigs, and they carry an aura of glamour. Hollywood helped too. Convoy, Smokey and the Bandit, and even Optimus Prime gave American trucks a mythical status. These rigs aren't just transport, they're rolling icons. What sets them apart? Size, for one. Engines often exceed 15 litres, with torque figures that can haul mountains. Drivers live in them for weeks, so they come with plush bunks, fridges, microwaves, and sometimes more luxury than a studio apartment in London. And they're made to cruise, clocking up millions of miles on highways where a straight stretch can last longer than a British summer. But that size comes at a cost. Try parking a Kenworth W900 in a Tesco car park and see how far you get. That's the difference. American trucks are kings of wide spaces, but they'd struggle on Britain's patchwork of medieval lanes. What about the rest of Europe? German engineering gave us the Mercedes-Benz Actros and MAN TGX, trucks designed for long-distance efficiency. The Swedes produced Volvo and Scania, brands that practically set the benchmark for driver comfort and reliability. Italian Iveco added flair, while the Dutch DAF struck a balance between practicality and performance. European trucks are almost scientific in their precision. High-tech cabins, aerodynamic cabs, and fuel-efficient drivetrains dominate. Scania's reputation for lasting millions of kilometers without fuss has made it a favorite across the continent. Volvo, meanwhile, built a name for safety, with innovations like the three-point seatbelts making their way into the haulage world. Compared to Britain's workhorses, European trucks feel like polished professionals. They're not quite as flashy as American rigs, but they're sleeker, more comfortable, and designed for drivers to spend weeks on the road without feeling like they've been stuffed into a tin can. One of the clearest differences is under the bonnet. British lorries often relied on homegrown diesels from Leyland, Rolls-Royce, Gardner, and Cummins. The Gardner 6LX was legendary, famed for efficiency and near-bulletproof reliability. A Gardner could rack up 1.5 million miles if maintained properly. The problem? They weren't fast. Drivers often joked that you'd have time to brew a cup of tea before a fully laden Gardner-powered truck reached top speed. In America, engines were monsters. Detroit Diesel, Caterpillar, and Cummins, in their American spec, built powerhouses. Big horsepower, loud exhausts, and enough torque to drag an aircraft carrier if you gave them a chance. Europe, once again, found the middle ground. Scania V8s delivered power with efficiency. Volvo engines offered smooth refinement. Mercedes developed technically advanced powertrains that met emission standards long before others caught up. So, who wins the engine war? Well, if it's about brute force, America takes it. If it's about reliability and fuel economy, Britain's Gardner diesels might still be the unsung heroes. Drivers know the cab is more than just a workplace, it's a home. And here's where you see cultural differences. British lorries of the 60s through 80s were not exactly glamorous. Space was minimal, bunks were often cramped, and luxuries were rare. It wasn't until later models like the ERF E-Series that proper comfort became a priority. By contrast, American trucks have always been about the sleeper cab. You can walk inside some of them. TV, air conditioning, full-size beds. It's less like a lorry and more like a mobile apartment. That's because long-haul drivers in the US can be away for weeks, and you can't exactly rely on finding a travelodge in the middle of Kansas. European cabs sit somewhere in between. They're more spacious than Britain's older designs, with high roof options, flat floors, and ergonomic layouts. Scandinavian trucks in particular made a point of prioritizing driver comfort, and many British hauliers eventually switched to them for long-distance work. Another key difference comes down to regulation. Britain historically had lower weight limits than continental Europe or the US. For years, the maximum was 32 tons, compared to 40 tons in Europe and 80,000 pounds or about 36 tons in the States. That meant British lorries had to be lighter and more agile, while European and American rigs could afford to be heavier, longer, and more powerful. This shaped design philosophy. The British 8-wheeler rigid was king of the road in its day, while in America, nothing less than an articulated tractor-trailer would do. These rules didn't just affect design, they influenced culture. The classic British lorry became distinct from the truck across the pond. Let's not forget, truck drivers are some of the funniest people you'll ever meet. In Britain, humour was often needed because of the quirks of the lorries themselves. You'd hear things like, if it's a Leyland, keep the tow rope handy, or Foden two-stroke, louder than the load it's carrying. In America, the jokes leaned into size. How many Peterbilts does it take to block a road? Just one, parked across it sideways. And in Europe, drivers teased the Swedes. If you drive a Scania, don't forget your slippers, because it's basically a hotel. Humor aside, these cultural quirks reveal something deeper. Trucks are not just machines. They're a part of national identity, rolling ambassadors of how each country moves its goods. By the 1990s, things started to shift. British truck makers, Leyland, ERF, Foden, Seddon Atkinson were all eventually absorbed by global giants. Leyland became part of DAF, ERF ended up under MAN, and Foden disappeared after PACCAR's reshuffle. Britain's once proud industry lost its independence. Today, if you see a new British registered truck, chances are it's wearing a foreign badge. Meanwhile, American manufacturers consolidated too, but they kept their national flavour. Kenworth and Peterbilt still feel distinctly American, even though both are PACCAR brands. Europe's giants, DAF, Scania, Volvo, Mercedes became dominant across the globe, exporting trucks to markets everywhere. So Britain's unique lorries became more of a memory, while the world moved on to a handful of international heavyweights. So the big question, who actually rules the road? If you're judging by sheer glamour and cultural presence, the Americans win. Their trucks are movie stars. If you're judging by technology, efficiency, and long-haul dominance, Europe probably takes the crown. And if you're talking about plucky determination, squeezing through impossible gaps, and hauling loads with character and grit, then Britain has to be in the conversation. The truth is, each region ruled in its own arena. America had the highways, Europe had the autobahns, and Britain had the villages and quarries that would terrify anyone else. It's not so much who rules the road, but how each country shaped its lorries to master the roads they had. Scammell or a thundering Peterbilt, remember they're not just machines, they're reflections of where they came from. Britain gave the world characterful workhorses, America gave us rolling palaces, and Europe gave us efficient titans. Who rules the road? Maybe it's not about one winner. Maybe it's about appreciating just how differently nations answered the same challenge. How do you move mountains on wheels? If you enjoyed this thorough video into the world of lorries and trucks, don't forget to hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments, which truck would you most want to drive for a day? The British Routeman, an American Kenworth, or a European Scania V8? Thanks for watching, and keep your eyes on the road ahead.